said that I was going to be open and honest and real with you, so let me just share with you that I'm an emotional wreck. You're not supposed to laugh at that. That wasn't actually a joke. I feel deep, gut-wrenching sadness for our Israeli brothers and sisters who are in the midst of an unending war with no clear path and no real viable options. I'm disappointed in the Israeli government that didn't keep its citizens safe, although I'm glad to disillusioned by the IDF leadership, didn't listen to those who were saying that an attack was coming, and then we're not there to defend the kibbutzim and the towns. I'm so angry at Hamas and Hezbollah and the other Iranian proxies that I just want to bomb the crap out of Gaza and Beirut and Yemen. I have utter contempt for the United Nations, who cannot muster a condemnation of terrorism, but instead rewards Hamas and the Palestinians with a seat among the member nations as the state of Palestine. And it's not just what is happening in the Middle East. I'm fearful of rising anti-Semitism across the globe. I'm concerned that the extreme ends of the right and the left are taking control of our political parties here in this country. And finally, I would be lying if I said I wasn't anxious over the upcoming election. Over the past couple of months, I have spoken to many of you as you have expressed these same feelings. And as I have been walking around with all these emotions, I am oddly grateful that I had to write these sermons, because it gave me a place to begin to sort them all out. Over the next 10 days, let me say, no politics this year, no social issues. I know some of you are very excited about that. I just smile inside, not outside. But no politics, no social issues, just me and you being open and honest about what is happening in our hearts. Over the next 10 days, I want to take you on a journey that we started last night and this morning, recognizing that so many of you are in challenging places. I want to give you some thoughts about how to move to a better place, a place of strength and hope. I've approached these high holy days with trepidation, knowing that it has been an unbelievably and excruciatingly long year, knowing that there are still hostages and their families in limbo, knowing that there are families who have celebrated an entire year's simchas and holidays without their loved ones, knowing that the terrible events of last October demand to be mourned and remembered among all the other events of Jewish history. I know all of this, and I think you do as well. The question becomes, how do we ensure that our sadness and our anger do not cripple us, but rather ultimately serve to strengthen the Jewish people and Jewish faith? So let me dive right in and say, knowing that we almost never have a choice about what happens to us, but we always have a choice to how to respond, here are 3 responses. Our first response should be one of survival. Not simply the notion that we survived because we didn't die alongside so many of our Israeli brothers and sisters, but we must have a deep faith that we will get past this moment, which makes us feel like our lives are so precarious. We will remain alive. We will pull through. We will continue. We will persist, endure. We will persevere. We will do this because because we have done it so many times in the past. Whether it was the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem in 586 BCE and then again in 70 CE, or the expulsion from England in 1290, from France in 1394, from Spain in 1492, in Portugal in 1497, whether it was the Chmelnytsky massacre in 1648, or the Russian pogroms at the end of the 19th century, or the Holocaust, we have survived, and we will do it again. My classmate and my colleague, Rabbi Hannah Yerushalmi, has spent the past year writing incredible poetry, which has given voice to so many of my feelings this past year. She wrote a beautiful poem that captures this sentiment. The poem's titled, "Survival is an Inheritance Too." Tonight, I will remind my children that they are descendants of Jews who survived the expulsion from Spain on their mother's side and the pogroms of Poland on their father's side. I will remember that their ancestors lit candles and set alight oil menorahs to bring light into the darkness. I will remind them that they are a link in a long chain of precious souls whose grit overcame the unimaginable. After all, if we can believe we can inherit eye color or height or skin tone, then why can't we believe that survival is an inheritance too? When the world around you or the story that you have been telling yourself crumbles, simply surviving is important, but it's not enough. Survival needs to lead us to our second response. We need to find meaning in the pieces that are left. Tomorrow we will read the story of the Akedah. As reassuring as it is that Isaac is not sacrificed in the end, there is still death in the story. In Isaac's place, a ram is sacrificed. There's a beautiful midrash, a story from Jewish tradition that tells what happened to the ram. Now you say, the ram was sacrificed, was put on an altar, was burned up. What do you mean? Okay? What's left? Tradition says that God resurrects the lamb even with the ashes. Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa teaches, the builders of the ancient temple used the ram's ashes as the very foundation of that holy place. King David used its sinews as strings for his harp. The prophet Elijah claimed its skin to be his coat. As for the ram's two horns, the smaller one called the people together at the foot of Mount Sinai, and the larger one waits and will sound one day at the coming of the Messiah. Even though he experienced the trauma of his day, the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, Hanina ben Dosa teaches us that we can find meaning even when we sit in despair amongst the ashes. Life crises are seismic events. They have the power to shake the entrenched beliefs we hold and force us to think in completely new ways. Confronting a traumatic event and trying to make sense of it can therefore lead to powerful shifts in thinking. The work of finding meaning moves us to our third response, recreation and growth. This year I learned about a psychological phenomenon called post-traumatic growth, similar to post-traumatic stress. Okay? This is the mirror. Okay? It was identified by psychologists Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun in the 1990s. They recognized that a approximately 20% of people never recover from their trauma. At the same time, the pair suggested that between 50 and 60% emerge having experienced some form of growth in 5 categories. 1, survivors of trauma recognize and embrace new opportunities. 2, they forge stronger relationships with loved ones as well as with other victims. 3, they cultivate inner strength, knowing that they have overcome tremendous hardship. 4, they gain a deeper appreciation for life. 5, their relationship to religion and spirituality changes and evolves. I don't wish trauma on anyone, but those 5 areas of growth sound pretty good. While this happens on an individual level, it can also happen on a wider societal level. All we need to do is go back to those periods of destruction in Jewish history and discover that each one of them birthed new forms of Jewish life. The destructions of ancient Israel gave birth to the Torah, compiled in its final form in the Babylonian exile. The Roman destruction of Judean independence in 70 CE moved us from a centralized, hierarchical, temple-based Judaism to a rabbinic Judaism that is decentralized, focused on worship and study and mitzvot. The expulsion from Spain in 1492 gave rise to a migration that spread all the way to Tzfat, where the roots of Kabbalah and our mystical traditions took hold. The Ukrainian uprising in the mid-17th century gave birth to the joyfulness of Hasidism. The Holocaust gave birth to new theologies and smoothed the path toward a state of Israel. What will post-traumatic growth look like for the Jewish people? What can we be after this that would be better? Come back on Yom Kippur, and I'm going to offer some suggestions. What I do know is that we will survive. We will rise up as we always have following the tragedies of our peoples. And we will create anew. No one of us alone can be responsible for the survival, the recreation, and growth of the Jewish people. And we might still just be in survival mode at this point, not yet ready to start creating what will come next. But perhaps, just perhaps, we can find the reassurance that we will rise up. We can make the small but significant statement of Am Yisrael Chai. The Jewish people will live on.